Hi everyone, signing on from chilly Massachusetts. I realize most of my kin talks have been on tropical in tropical places, so really happy to be here and waiting to bring on my guest, Dr. Marcia Thompson, who will be talking all about childhood trauma and addiction. I'm very, very happy to have her. And before she signs on with me, I would just love to have everyone here just ground in, ground down. And so how we do that is through breathing deeply. So we can all take a deep breath in and audible exhale, letting go of whatever has happened in your day and just trying to be present. Going to bring, you can put in the chat box below. And yeah. Hello.
Hi, I'm here. I just stepped away for like a half a second to close the door and manage sound. How are we?
Sounds good on your end. How about for me?
Great. Exceptional.
Awesome.
I think I could use a little more light though, honestly. So I'm just going to get myself some more light.
Okay, no problem.
Just a moment. Be right back.
Take your time.
Thanks.
Yes. So happy to have Dr. Marcia joining today. If you have any questions, as I said before, just put them in the chat box. This is something we'll get to, although we have lots of things to get to on our call this evening, afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I am first just going to do a little introduction on how I met this beautiful soul and the whole reasoning around kin talks and how they came about, which was during a time of COVID where the world was shut down. And for me, my love language, connecting with others and connecting with teachers and friends and mentors that inspire me and have inspired me across the globe. And so Dr. Marcia is definitely one of those people who made a very big impact on me in a very short amount of time. And we met each other about a year and a half ago, in the beautiful little village of Lode Marcos, which many of you know, that became a very just little safe haven for me as I was going through probably many, not one, death portals of mine at that time. And she, like an earth angel she is, just showed up for in a way for me that I really needed. And I felt so completely safe. And when I wasn't feeling safe, she really helped me to feel safe and come back into my body. And I did an acupuncture session with her that really helped to bring up things that maybe I was suppressing and expressing, and I just left feeling like I had just the biggest warm hug. And every time I'm in her presence, my nervous system just completely goes into rest. And so without further ado, I would like to hand the mic over to Dr.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such a beautiful, heart-nourishing introduction. Thank you. You've handed the mic over to me, and I'm not quite sure what you would like me to say.
Yes, I would just like for you to introduce yourself and kind of how you got into the work that you work and
Certainly. I'm just going to check my volume. I did hear you ask me to talk about how I got into my work, what I do, and I missed the third piece. What was that, please?
No, just that, just how you got into your work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, how I got into my work. You know, when we talk about being chosen or being called, oftentimes I describe our mission, or what Chinese medicine refers to as our destiny, as your mission impossible assignment. Your calling, your destiny, what you have come here to do, or what you have been assigned by the universe to do, the role that the universe has destined for you to fulfill in service of creation, in service of the awakening of your own consciousness and the realization of who and what you are, meaning this expression of what we call source energy. We've crystallized and condensed into one human being. So that's the simplest way I can describe how I came to do this work and to live in this way. The specifics around it are having started studying meditation when I was in my mid-20s, and having some kind of, this is the predestined part, interest in all things Asian philosophy, Asian aesthetics. And one thing led to another. Meditation led to my familiarity, my curiosity around acupuncture, because I was a professional dancer performing with the off-Broadway show Stomp, which just closed in New York City earlier this year. And working with my body led me to working with other people's bodies, becoming certified in Pilates, teaching other people how to teach Pilates, looking at all of these physical bodies that had these chronic pain patterns, and realizing the chronic pain patterns had nothing to do with muscles and bones and everything to do with something that was locked and trapped in the mind. It was a repetitive thought pattern. That led me into Chinese medicine, because Chinese medicine had all of the answers that I was seeking to how the physiological self is an expression of the psycho-spiritual self. 15, 20 years later, I'm now a Chinese medicine psychologist, treating trauma and addiction through the use of Chinese medicine, acupuncture herbs, remote acupuncture, somatic therapies, including somatic experiencing, polyvagal theory, the Feldenkrais method, and contemporary psychotherapy techniques. So I work with people now one-on-one in person, and I work with people online remotely.
Mm-hmm. Wow, what a journey. Yeah, I didn't know that you're a dancer. It makes sense, and totally makes sense. Wow, that's really cool. And kind of what drives you to do this work? What has driven you?
I don't think I have much of a choice, honestly. It's the only thing. That and ballet.
Okay.
I say ballet. I take a ballet class 3 times a week still with a brilliant teacher in Toronto.
Wow.
And ballet and doing this work with human souls and consciousness is those are the only things really that allow my life to make sense. If I were doing anything else, I'd have to kind of make myself do it. I really have to make myself do it. It's more of something that I am than something that I do.
And kind of get to this work because you transitioned from living in New York City to where you are now. And what was that kind of transition for you?
Well, the soft start of it happened, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago now, a little less than 15 years. I was sitting in grad school one day, and my grad school has a flagship campus in San Diego. I was studying at the campus in New York. And I thought, if I don't get into a dance company with this one choreographer, I'll move to San Diego, I'll get a little house in Baja, and I'll commute back and forth and teach acupuncture classes at the college and live in Mexico. I got into the dance company and then got married. So there were things that were keeping me in New York. And when 2020 happened, the dance company came to an abrupt close. It was time to withdraw from my marriage. So the things that were keeping me in New York City were no longer keeping me there. And one day I found myself standing in my bedroom, jealous of everyone who was working from home. I want to work from home. And that's when the message came through. It's, remember when you wanted to go to Mexico? Time to go to Mexico. There's nothing keeping you here anymore. My business was tanking. COVID completely dismantled my acupuncture practice because no one wanted to leave the house.
Right.
So there was nothing keeping me there. And those are like the painful messages. Like, no, it's time for you to go. Your life is not here anymore. I have a better life for you.
And how been arriving for you in Mexico?
What was the question again? What was the first part?
How has it been for you to be in Mexico, to arrive there?
Arriving. Oh, I just said to someone on the beach this morning, this is the best thing I could have ever done for my life.
Yeah.
Being here. I mean, we met here in Lo de Marcos. So you know the magic of this place, the magic of this land and these people. It's the best thing I could have done for my life. I was honestly, quite frankly, and I tell my friends this, I was walking dead. My spirit had already, it was just gone because I wasn't alive. I wasn't taking ballet classes. I was existing, but I wasn't alive. I came here to come back to life, and that's what's happening.
And kind of circling back to how we met when I was talking about going through this like death portal, I feel that a lot of people are going through this sort of death portal, let's say right now, and how would you, help someone through going through feeling just totally overwhelmed, feeling stuck, not knowing where to go or what to do, and I'm hearing that from a lot of people right now of feeling stuck.
Well, stuck from my perspective, just from the way I work with people, feeling stuck and feeling overwhelmed are rather different packages. But the answers are very simple. The execution of them is where the work takes place. That's when you have to do the deep work with yourself. But the answers are really simple. Are you living the life that you know you're supposed to be living? Are you living the life that you believe you're supposed to be living? Are you being who you actually are? And if you are not, then with the people with whom I work, we look at the different sectors of your life: personal, spiritual, financial, professional, romantic, nutritional, physiological. And we look at where the deficits are. It's the same as a standard Chinese medicine intake. Anyone who comes in to see me for a treatment or who sees me remotely goes through the standard Chinese medicine intake, where we look at all of your systems and every facet of your life, including your childhood, including how your mother's pregnancy was with you, because these are factors that determine epigenetic imprints that kind of override genetics. So I do that as a Chinese medicine practitioner and also as a Chinese medicine psychologist / counselor. We look at what's going on for you, and we see where things may be running too hot, or where they may be too much distress in your system, and where you may not be nourished enough by your life. And we start to calibrate and recalibrate. And it's small incremental changes, because those are the ones that actually go the deepest and make the real transformation possible.
And thank you for speaking to that. And I think so much right now, what I'm hearing from people in my life and network is like that overwhelm. And if you can speak a little bit on that. I know we did go through kind of what you do, but when people are just feeling, the word I keep hearing is I'm stressed. It's so much. It's, the world, everything that's happened. And I think we're still going through this, post-COVID / our world is different today than it was. Very, very different, and adjusting, and these micro adjustments that people, being back in my hometown where I grew up, I'm seeing it. What's happening here in America, being, living abroad for so long is just this trying to go back to the way things were, but they're not the way they were.
Nothing will ever be the way that it was.
Yeah.
Nothing ever is the way that it was. And that's the simple and very gentle truth of things. That's just one of the laws of the universe. Things are always changing into other things. There's a Zen master whose name I can't remember right now, and he was asked by one of his students, can you please just give us a definition for Zen? What is Zen? And he said, things change. And that's it. And in the earliest days of the COVID crisis, I sat with innumerable numbers of people. Like, I just want everything to go back to normal. I just want everything to go back to normal. And it's been an interesting, what I call, backhanded blessing of this time, because it has forced us to face ourselves, which can be overwhelming. if And our culture, it's not our fault. That's the thing. There's no deficit. No one is failing at anything. We have just found ourselves overnight, quite literally, immersed in a set of circumstances and conditions for which we have no preparation, no training. There's no education around this in our culture, the way that we're raised, what we're taught to believe is supposed to happen in life. We have no frame of reference. So there is a lot of being untethered and uncertainty. And it's the uncertainty, you were talking about your death portals. It's the uncertainty and the specific challenge of having to face the possibility of our own death with which we were presented with COVID, that I believe has stirred up so much distress, in addition to the overwhelming inflation and the very sudden increase in prices and cost of living. There's a YouTuber who was really popular right around 2020, and he was talking about the big squeeze that was coming with this particular stock. The big squeeze, the big squeeze, the squeeze is coming, the squeeze is coming. And every time I watched him, I don't think he's talking about this one stock. I have a feeling that he might be talking about something that's much broader, a wave that's on its way. And as I watched the economic financial landscape change in the US, as I've watched it change over the last couple of years, like, this is the squeeze that he was talking about. Everybody's getting squeezed. Yeah. And I see it in the eyes of people who come down here from the States, or friends of mine who live here, and they have to go back to the States to take care of some business, or Canada, and they come back and their eyes are this big. Like, it's not good. It's really not good. Everyone's being squeezed. So I think extrapolating that, and this is the way spiritual practices work too. It's like taking our individual life and putting them within a larger framework, within a larger context, to understand how what's taking place in our individual incarnation is reflective of the trend and the momentum of the whole. And it's not so much of what's happening to me in my personal life, or you in your individual life. It's like, this is the way things are right now. And within this structure, like, where is the room and the space for me to continue to do what the ancient practices instruct us to do? Quiet my mind, open my heart. Quiet your mind, open your heart. And as you quiet your mind, as you open your heart, you actually make yourself available to receive the guidance and the instruction that is already here, waiting to reach you. The coincidences that are not coincidences start to present themselves to you. And life starts to feel less overwhelming, and you actually start to receive what I call the backhanded blessings of this time.
Yes. And I love what you said there, because I think the biggest message I know in my own life, it's like every single time I slow down, and I just slow down, it's like what you just said, quieting the mind, opening the heart, quieting the mind, and I have to remind myself continuously, as I'm back in America, I want to speed up, because that is just and especially being where I grew up in my childhood, that was I was on for, the first 30 years of my life, never stopped. My nervous system was in fight or flight constantly. And so when I did stop, my nervous system was still in fight or flight and still going. So I had to retrain and continue to do practices that helped me slow down. And I know for me, at first, when I started to try to quiet the mind, I literally was going crazy, because my mind had no idea. I had no frame of context, no learning, nothing on quieting the mind. And that was not even any language that was used in my household growing up, or anywhere for that matter. And so I think it's beautiful that now this has been being the importance of slowing down is more common now, but it's not necessarily the easiest. And what I've learned is to just tell someone to, oh, just sit down and meditate. That will work for you. It doesn't. It might not work, especially if you have a dysregulated nervous system. And I didn't know that before. So I was aggravating myself even more, thinking, okay, why am I the only one that can't sit still? And what's wrong with me? Maybe something's wrong with me. And so if there's anything that you could speak to that, because I know you're specifically trained in this trauma-informed and nervous system, I would love to hear.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like to, before I answer your question, just really take a moment to acknowledge you as a human being, acknowledge you as a woman, you as someone who's providing an essential life-saving service to humanity and to creation, having watched you transform and metabolize everything that you were experiencing in a way that was so skillful, as the Buddhists say. It was really, really astonishing and heartwarming. The stuff that I know we're all capable of, you actually do it. As we like to say, you are for sure the real deal. You're a real deal. And it's beautiful to witness. So I thank you for just inviting me to be here with you today for this conversation, to share this virtual space and time, and just continue to magnify this vibration and continue to feed into this momentum of clarity and goodness and awakening of consciousness. And that's the way I would answer your question, actually, because when we find ourselves in places of overwhelm, and when we start to go into these habituated patterns, especially when there's a childhood trauma piece in the equation, these habituated patterns of making ourselves wrong. What am I doing wrong? I'm not getting this. Why am I not getting this? It's so very important to remember, speaking of vibration and momentum, that the patterns that have been in existence in our lives have usually by this time decades of momentum behind them. And they have a lot of reinforcement from the culture and the news media and social conditioning and familial conditioning. So when you're just asking someone or telling someone to calm down, what is that? That is not something that the nervous system understands as a task. That's a concept. And when we live from the conceptual mind, we are never living from our bodies, which are the physiological representation of our souls. The soul expresses itself through the body. The mind as well, and the spirit expresses themselves through the body. But the conceptual mind is just the realm of ideas. So the nervous system has no idea really what to do with that command, calm down. My ballet teacher says this. She's a devout Buddhist, so she's brilliant. Taking class with her is an amazing experience. But if you want your body to do something new, give it a pleasurable task. So you have to give it something good to do. Our bodies, our spirits, not always our minds, depending on what the history has been, but our bodies and our spirits will always go in the direction of feeling good and feeling better. I tell people when I'm working with them physiologically, if you give your body just like the tiniest slip of a crack, it's going to shoot right through it. So somatic therapies come in to do that. And I'd like to share an example of a very simple somatic therapy technique that downregulates your nervous system in a really beautiful way. Just a couple of instructions. You're going to take your thumb and you're going to take your ring finger. You might have to hold your pinky finger down to do that, but you don't have to hold it down forever. Just get your ring finger and your thumb at the base of your eyebrows here. Yeah. And then you can let go because you'll need your other hand to place it at the base of your skull. Once you've done that, take your whole tongue and lift it up against the roof of your mouth. So from the tip of your tongue to the root of your tongue, just up against the roof of your mouth, and now the base of your tongue all the way down by your voice box gets pulled into the back of your throat. So you may feel right. You may feel your head actually move up and back with this motion. And now inhale and exhale up to 9 times. 9 is a powerful number in the universe because it's the square of 3. 3 is one of the most powerful numbers in the universe. And as you inhale and exhale 9 times, you're likely to start to feel your nervous system quiet down. The tongue on the roof of your mouth and in the back of your throat creates a gentle pressure against the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It runs from the brain down to your pelvis. And it's the physiological representation of the 6 chakras. The 7th one is metaphysical. The crown chakra is at the top of your head. But the vagus nerve, the vagus nerve helps to regulate and express the 7 chakras and the emotions associated with each energy center of the body. And once you've reached your 9, usually by the time you reach 4 or 5, you start to experience a down regulation. And by the time you reach 9, you're back to who you're supposed to be.
I like that.
Yeah.
Very pleasurable
Yeah.
to feel that.
So if you feel yourself heading into a panic attack, if you're already in full-blown panic, this will arrest it and downgrade it. I will offer a word of clarity. For some people, depending on what's residing within, it can actually bring stuff up and make you think you're getting worse, or make you think that the exercise did not work. What it's done is brought out the stuff that's living in the back of your emotional closet so your system can release it. But if you do another round of it, or just put your feet in the earth, that's another technique for grounding. Put your feet in the earth and allow the earth to reabsorb all of the chaotic charge in your system. You'll start to find your way to clarity again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just reminds me of, there are so many quick and easy to do techniques to regulate our system, yet sometimes I know myself included could be like, well, if I don't sit and meditate for an hour, what's the point? Or if I don't spend 2 hours at the gym, what's the point? And it's like this all or nothing mentality that is definitely a program that I'm trying to unlearn that, but I hear that a lot. Well, what is the point? What could a 3-minute thing do? And I can tell you real live time that it does. It's a pattern interrupt. It shifts completely, feeling a little bit overwhelmed to, oh, I feel relaxed.
So much of our meaning our Western culture, and particularly with the national motto of the U.S., we're number one. We're very competitive. Americans, at least in particular, very competitive. And that level of competition gets directed into the self, and it feeds right into the mentality of not enoughness.
Yeah.
Not good enough. This is never good enough. What's the point? What's that going to do? It's the more or better ethos that the marketing and the advertising world profits greatly from. You're not doing enough. You need to do this. If you want to A, then B with my product, and I have the answer. We, as we are exactly enough for life to come to know itself. And if we look at it from a more kind of day-to-day, real-world living perspective, if we look at all the things each of us is responsible for in a single day, forget your whole life plan, your business plan, what you're responsible for this month, this season, this year, when this payment is due, when that payment is due, and when this, you can't do it all in one day. And it's certainly not to the extent that we are told we are supposed to be doing it, which is, it's a very effective way of selling products and packages. if you look at your day and so if you have a spare 5 minutes or 3 minutes, instead of scrolling on your phone, that's 2 or 3 minutes that you can take to just ground yourself or stretching. Stretching immediately gets oxygen into your system. It gets oxygen to your brain. It wakes you up. It lowers your blood pressure, and you can keep moving again. 2 or 3 minutes. You don't have to spend an hour in the gym, 15, 30, 45 minutes commuting to the gym.
Yeah.
2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And yes, you have so many examples of these little 3-minute tools also on your page. I was continuing to go through it the other night and like, oh my God, save this, save this. And I loved this one as well. That was really helpful for me.
Lung 10.
Lung 10.
Yeah, lung 10. This is actually the magic hiccup stopping point also.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Lung 10 relaxes the diaphragm. If you look in the standard textbooks, it says lung 10 descends the lung chi. So if you have a cough, if you have hiccups, if you are burping even, lung 10 will help with burping, even though burping is a digestive system activity. But because lung 10 descends the lung chi and it lowers your blood pressure, and because the diaphragm itself is it's the physical boundary between our physical selves and our metaphysical selves. Like breathing is both conscious and unconscious. That's what the diaphragm represents. So getting the diaphragm to relax also has an impact on the mind and on the spirit. It brings everything down and levels everything out. So diaphragm is supposed to be this nice wide arching dome, so it just allows that dome to be what it is.
Yeah, thank you. So I have definitely lots of questions, but for the next question, if you had to make a list, what do you wish everyone knew about addiction and childhood trauma recovery?
If I had to make a list, what do I wish everyone knew about addiction and childhood trauma? The overwhelming percentage of cases of addiction are rooted in childhood trauma. Most of the studies that are done these days, clinical trials, come up with numbers of like 76 to 87-ish% of people in recovery programs, whether it's addiction treatment centers or 12-step recovery, report some incidents of childhood trauma. In a study that the numbers that I have been collecting over time, and people I've spoken to directly, the numbers are more in the 90s. So I'm thinking with these studies, people, I don't know what's happening with the studies, but from the people I've spoken to, the people with whom I work, there isn't a single person who has an addiction history who does not have a childhood trauma history. And if we look at the work that Gabor Mate is doing, Dr. Gabor Mate, he says as well, and it's a clear thing to understand. Addictions come in to serve the function of soothing a system that is overwhelmed and has no tools or skills for soothing itself or managing the overwhelm. No framework for understanding it either. There's a lot more I can say on that, but you asked me for a list, so I'm going to leave that there. Addiction is overwhelmingly rooted in childhood trauma in well over 90%, over 95% of cases. That's one. Two, there are answers.
Yeah.
There are very specific answers and methods for healing trauma in a way that actually transforms your karma. Depending on how you choose to look at things, and you can look at them purely from the clinical standpoint of intergenerational trauma and epigenetics. These things are cyclical. These belief systems continue to repeat themselves, reinforce themselves with the passage of each generation. That is one way of explaining karma. It's an energy, it's a cycle, it's a practice rooted in a belief system that continues to repeat itself in what the Buddhists refer to as the cycle of samsara, the continual wheel of death and rebirth. And by addressing, like allowing yourself to be the place where that karmic wheel does not continue to repeat itself. You're transforming not only your karma, but the karma of the generations before you and the karma of the generations that come after you, including your one incarnation and the incarnations that you've had previously and will have ongoing. So it's like the Native American principle of thinking 7 generations in the past and forward. You can heal your karma as you use, and this is the third piece, use your trauma as the indication for how you're supposed to be living your life. Because it's not a linear process where it's, and again, we are acculturated into thinking this is how things work, this is how life works. Have pain, take pill, no pain. Have anxiety, take pill, no anxiety. Overweight, go to gym, take supplements, no more weight gain, no more weight problem. And there's always a much deeper story to it. Always, always, always. That's the karma, that's the generational trauma. And what happens, Ram Dass says this, or used to say this all the time, your karma becomes your dharma, meaning the things with which you have come into this life are the signs and the indications for the work that you are meant to do with yourself here in order to become yourself. So, addiction overwhelmingly rooted in trauma. You can heal your karma by healing your trauma, and your trauma is your dharma. This is how, the way you heal yourself is how you're supposed to be living.
So cool. And with that, I know that the word trauma is very trendy right now, and in terms of that, it's used quite often. And I just recently saw an interview with Gabe Mate, and he was saying, you know, the little trauma versus big trauma. And I remember I say, I didn't have any trauma, childhood trauma. My family was pretty good. And then when I think about it, I'm like, well, there were, I wasn't sexually abused or things, but other things did happen where my emotional needs weren't met. And I used to just put that aside and say, well, I know people that have had big traumas, and so mine doesn't really matter. And could you speak a little bit on that? I know that, that I don't want to say shouldn't, but that doesn't take away with how I felt, my little girl, that her needs didn't get met in some way, shape, or form.
Exactly. And by no means do I intend to minimize anyone's experience of their lives and what has happened to them. And at the same time, each of us has experienced trauma in our living. It's the nature of the human condition. The Buddha identified the 4 noble truths. The first noble truth of Buddhism is that there is suffering, period. That's the nature of existence in this realm. There is suffering. There's a cause to suffering, and there is a way out of suffering. And the way out of suffering is the Eightfold Path. Those are the 4 noble truths of Buddhism. And that Eightfold Path is once again a set of instructions. This is why I'm an Eastern philosophical practitioner. There are instructions for how to live that have been here from the dawn of creation. And that's the principle, I'll say this really quickly, that's the principle of yin and yang, the interdependence, or what the Buddhists refer to as the law of dependent origination. In order for any one thing to exist in this universe, its opposite must exist. So where there is suffering, there is also the answer to suffering that exists. And the Eastern philosophical traditions give us a set of instructions for how to live and heal from our suffering, and to understand and recognize your own trauma within your one lifetime, and soothe, address, nourish, nurture that in a way that's clear, effective, committed, and grounded in a willingness to surrender, the word that nobody ever wants to hear. And that is, we all have it. And that's that commonality of experience too that I think brings us closer together and allows us to live with less fear and more open-heartedness. We have all had something happen to us. The Hindu and Advaita traditions say the same thing. You come into this universe, you're on this trajectory, and something happens
Yep.
to knock you off course. And how you work with it and how you get yourself back on course is your life path, your dharma.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you for speaking on that. And I think kind of segues into the next of, you know, most of us have this kind of personal story and what knocks us off. And I would love to hear, you know, your personal story. I mean, that could be another couple hours. So we could also go into another question of mine.
No, let's stick with this one. We'll absolutely stick with this one. Oh God, that's another book.
That's
I,
enough. Yeah.
oh my God, I have so often thought about writing a book about my family.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk to people about my family, it's like it's book worthy. It is book worthy material. Okay, let's start this way. Because I recently delivered a talk at the California Institute for Internal Studies in their somatic psychotherapy department. And it was on the healing of childhood trauma through the allowing, like the essential nature of grief and the grieving process in the healing of trauma. So I'll preface this by offering that. And I gave them kind of just a brief history of my family. My father is a product of incest. My father's mother is his sister. My father's father is his grandfather. And the relationship between him and his mother, and my father's still alive, so it's kind of, you know, it's a big thing that I'm doing by stepping out and sharing this information. And it's in, at this point, it's in reverence of and in honor of my father for the life that he has been able to craft for himself and the life that he was able to give me. Because the relationship between him and his mother was very deeply fraught, as one might imagine. So there's that. That's my father who raised me. He was a rageaholic. Surprise, surprise. He's also, he was a very accomplished nurse. He was a registered nurse in the, surprise, surprise, registered nurse in the Psych ER at Jacobi Hospital in the Bronx, where I was born and I grew up. My mother was adopted at age 2. She remembers the day that her birth mother gave her away into a family where she was raised by the people I knew as my grandparents. And she was molested from the time she was 2 until she was about 12 years old. And right after that, she met my father. So she went from molestation in a family where her father parent, her male parent, my grandfather, was also a cult member. And she witnessed all manner of things paranormal and outside of what we would consider normal family activity, normal family social time. And my mother now at this stage of her life is taking really good care of herself. And like my father, understandably now, it's like at this stage of my life, I understand, you know, I chose not to have children because I wanted to be like the buck was going to stop with me. I knew there was no way I could ever avoid repeating even the smallest thing that I had experienced in my family as a child. So I chose not to have children and work instead on my own self and be of service to others. But I look back now on my parents. My mother had me when she was 18. She walked across the stage to receive her high school diploma pregnant with me. My father was like 21 or 22. I'm trying to imagine myself having gone through what they went through and having children and raising people in a new country because they came from Jamaica. You know, I've come from the US to start a new life here, and there's a lot of work involved. It's all these paradigm shifts. And I have a whole host of support and training and therapy and psychotherapy and Chinese medicine and Eastern philosophies. I have all of these things that support me, that are my resources. They had none of that. And they raised 3 kids. My father married another woman when I was 6 months old. My parents were never married. And yet my parents had 3 children together.
Wow.
I grew up in a haunted house. The house that we moved into when I was almost 7 was haunted. There were people walking around, and I was supposed to be the only person in the house. There were like digging sounds coming from the basement where a woman reportedly murdered and buried her sister. Like, it's not light stuff. It's book worthy.
Definitely book
worthy. Yeah, these are some of the most critical and impacting foundational elements of my formative years. And then there's growing up in an overwhelming majority, largely Irish and Italian community in the Bronx. Is the only family of color that owned a house that didn't live in the projects. There have been a lot of elements. A lot of elements. So you asked. There it is.
Thank you for sharing. I think and what beautiful work you do now because of all of that. And to see where you're at is just incredible to see that, where we come and the things that happen throughout our lives and how they shape us. I think we're losing connection a little bit. Can you hear me? Wi-Fi.
Okay.
We'll give it
Did I freeze? I'm here.
I can see. I can.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Awesome. I think we can probably get to maybe 2 more of the questions I would love to ask, and one is, you talk about the big, scary, gentle promise. I would love to hear more about that.
The big, scary, gentle promise. It actually came up in the list of the 3 things that I would love people to know, is that you can actually transform your life in a way that is satisfying to you. If you are willingness, just willing to surrender to the understanding that fear actually truly is an illusion. And the only 2 real elements in this universe are fear and love. And once we start to look at our fears, you were asking me a question about overwhelm and how to address that in our present day circumstances. But it's not just our present day circumstances. It is the nature of the human condition that we come to the understanding that fear is an illusion. And once we understand fear for what it is and from where it comes, and have the willingness to do the practices, it's the willingness to live differently. The promise is, it's not my promise. That's the whole thing about it. This is not my promise. It's the promise, it's the guarantee of the ancient teachings, the teachings that have been here from the very beginning. Do this, become free. This, and especially if there's a history of childhood trauma, especially if there's a history of severe childhood trauma, this, which is the facing of yourself in the totality of your existence, it's the death experience. You started off this talk referring to your death portals. It's having the willingness to go through your death experience while you are alive and emerge on the other side and understand that this is the pathway to freedom. And it's going to happen again.
Yes.
Again. And each time it happens, it's like playing a video game. The higher you go in the levels, the bigger the challenges become, but the more skillful you are. So it becomes much more of a spiritual a spiritual dance, a spiritual conversation. The conscious contact becomes a more and more real living thing. But the promise is that if you're willing to surrender to living the practices and living your life according to the instructions that we're all given, is that you will go through the fear and come out on the other side and really see that it was all an illusion.
Mm. I love that. I love the idea of the promise and the ancient teachings, because it's a lot about what I teach as well. You know, really looking at so much that was given to us thousands of years ago, whether through Ayurvedic or yogic Sanskrit and teachings, that it's there. It's, you know, there's not this new information we need to search for. It's we already have it. We already have it within us ourselves. But it's that willingness to, okay, let's try again. Let me do it again. I failed, and now I don't see failure as failure anymore. It's all just lessons. It's all just, oh, cool. How can I learn from this, rather than allowing it to drop me down and be out. You know, it's like, okay, I can get up and try it again. And I have the choice to do better next time, or whatever that means, to try differently.
Very much so. And that's so much of what I appreciate about the work you do. You are the living example of the things you teach. And there are a lot of people in the online world now presenting themselves as experts in this and that. But in order, the only thing that can heal a heart is another heart. And it's the reflection and the resonance that allows the wounded soul to have the willingness to return. And you do the work. You aren't just a messenger or just a teacher. You are the message, and that is the onus on each of us, is to be the living message. And that's the signal that other souls and other spirits pick up on. And that's how the healing begins. So I very much appreciate you as you are in the service and the insight and healing that you offer women in particular.
Thank you. Thank you. And Azam just wrote here, fear is different than shame, though. Fear of the unknown would be fear of uncertainty, but fear of hurting someone's heart, as long as it's not unfounded, would be to maintain that morality.
I'm not quite sure here. Let me read it myself also. And shame, sure, certainly fear is different from shame, and shame is also rooted in the fear that we're not good enough, that we're not enough. Fear of the unknown, fear of uncertainty, fear of hurting someone's heart, as long as it's not unfounded, would be to maintain that morality. I'm not quite sure what the last part of this statement means. Do you understand it better than I do?
No, I'm not sure the last part, but I definitely love, Azam, what you said in the beginning there, but maybe if you can explain a little bit what you mean on that one. But yeah.
If Ode to Azam can explain it some more, or me?
Yeah.
Ode
Oh,
to Azam?
Sarah and me. No, yeah. Okay, Azam. Thank you. And I guess just getting into the one more quick question about therapists, and I think, you know, there's a lot of therapists use psychotherapy and somatic therapy in the combo like you, but you have a very strong sense of the spiritual aspect. Can you talk a little bit about that? What makes you different than other therapists?
Certainly, and I'm just going to take a moment to say hi to my friend Haley, who just joined. Hi, Haley. Hi, Haley. And hi, Monique. I saw you jump on earlier. What makes me different from other therapists? Well, the first thing is that I'm not a therapist.
Okay.
Now, I don't have an LCSW. I'm not a licensed clinical social worker. I don't have an MSW. I don't have a master's in social work. I have a DACM. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And as such, I think that's the thing that really it gives me the advantage if there is such a thing in this kind of work. in that I'm not following a formula. I don't have a list of DSM. The DSM is the diagnostic manual for the psychotherapy world. I don't have a list of DSM diagnoses in my head as I'm talking to someone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not often talking, actually, when I'm working with someone. I'm listening a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly psychotherapists sit and listen. The thing that I hear more often than not when someone comes to me from having had a relationship with a traditional psychotherapist is that my psychotherapist was never listening to me, or my therapist was only ever talking at me. And certainly there are extraordinary therapists in the world. I have a therapist. I love my therapist. She helped me in ways that no one else was able to help me at the time. She wasn't a traditional therapist. And here's the defining characteristics. This is the X factor. Between her and me, between my therapist and me, there developed a natural relationship. And when I'm working with someone, I'm not just trying to get you to feel better or trying to help you stop doing whatever it is that you're doing that you don't want to do anymore. We sit together, and we are together in conscious awareness of the fact that there is suffering, and that I am there in service of the awakening of consciousness. There's a saying in Chinese medicine that intention follows the needle. Lesson.
Thank you.
My intention is to be of service in whatever way the person sitting across from me or sitting with me needs, based on the skill set I have available to me. And I make myself available for whatever guidance and instructions and directions come to me for working with this person. Intuitive thoughts, actual messages and instructions, and relying on the ancient teachings, because once again, it's not me telling you what I think is good for you. So these are the teachings. Here's how they apply to your life. Here's what your life is reflecting the teachings. And here's how the teachings can help you navigate this thing that happens in a human life. That's not just happening to you, and at the same time, this is happening for you. You're the only person who can live your incarnation. And it's having the ability to reside in both realms. The deeply personal, that is your individual life, and the overarching metaphysical, that is the human condition in which we are all kind of working ourselves out. Different from psychotherapy, for sure.
Very different. And thank you for talking about the difference there. And I'm unsure if at 1 hour it kicks me off. It used to do that with the live. It doesn't do that. So I want to just get to what people can expect with working with you and how they can reach you and all of the things, because it is just such an honor to have you here. And I know I want you back on doing a Kin Talk, because I know we could talk for so long about so many things. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Love you. And what people can expect. Chinese medicine intake is standard to allow me to understand your systems and your life and how everything is and is not working together. After that, there are numerous things that I do. Somatic therapy, Chinese medicine psychology, movement therapy, herbs therapy, contemporary psychotherapy techniques, including but not limited to EMDR. EMDR is the only clinical method that has been shown to reduce the overwhelm of traumatic memory. I offer that in my services as well. And then there's anything else that comes up, whatever else needs to be done. With some people, I'm working with someone right now, and we had this practice. I have a 6-week program, and in that 6-week program, 2 of those weeks, weeks 4 and 5, involve you calling me every day, and we talk for 10 minutes, for you to have the experience of just being listened to in a conscious, loving, non-judgmental, very neutral way. enough to the extent that you start to hear yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be part of the way we work together. Someone was describing my work to a friend the other day, and he said, well, what does she do? What does she do? And he said, she does whatever you need. That,
Love that.
that's what I make myself available for. I have specific skill sets, and within those skill sets, there's also the space for inspiration to come through. How people reach me, if you'd like to have more of a conversation about that, I have a 30-minute complimentary rapid relief call that you can sign up for on my website, stillpointacupuncture.com. And I think my username comes up on the screen here, perhaps. Yes,
Yep.
stillpointacupuncture.com. If you can sign up for a complimentary 30-minute rapid relief call there, and we'll talk. I'll listen. Really, you talk, I listen.
Thank you so much, Marcia. It was such a pleasure having you on here. I will have this posted on my feed for those of you that missed the replay. You can just click on her Instagram and you can find all the information there. She really does have incredible videos on that, as well as TikTok. So I'll leave it in the comment description, her information and how you can get in touch. But thank you all for joining so much, and thank you for signing on and all the way through Mexico. Send me some warm vibes because it's very cold.
Yeah, we'll send you some warmth and some sunny love.
Yes, and give Ori, your beautiful dog, a big squeeze for me.
Okay, I know you're one of his favorite people. I sure will.
Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon. Okay.